All right. Let's see if that's working now. Gonna check and see how my audio and video is doing. So if you can get me live and hear me, just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a comment or something. See what we're doing here. All right, not sure. There we go. Good. We're up and running. I apologize. Holy cow. Obviously had a video stream issue there. It wouldn't sync to the camera. And I didn't know why, but I did the classic technical issue of turning everything off and turning it back on again. And that seemed to work. Cool. Everybody coming in. I apologize about having to flip you over here. So, first off, want to take a moment and wish everybody out there who's a mother or has a mother, which should be everybody, happy Mother's Day. I know this is a weird day to do it, but there was so much news going on here recently that I wanted to take a moment and, I'm really trying to standardize the channel. And one of the comments I get a lot of from everybody is how much they enjoy when we do these live streams is maybe put this on a regular basis. For those of you who don't know, my day job is as a university professor. And the great thing is college is out. In the process of grading final exams right now. That will be done fairly shortly. And once that's done, I've got this entire summer devoted to really developing the channel and working on a more of a less of an ad hoc basis than what I have been on. So, for those of you who are longtime members, Patreons, or just new members who are just coming on, first off, I want to welcome you to the channel. I want to talk a little bit about what I do with this channel because there are some new people on here and let them know. So, my goal with the channel is to provide you a basically as objective as a view as I can on global shipping and what is going on out there. And obviously, there are plenty of news sites and sources that you can go to, but I don't think anybody does what I do here with kind of giving you, snapshots of the shipping industry and really trying to articulate what's involved with it. So, for example, I had a great comment from one of my Patreon subscribers the other day who sat there and said, what would be really great, Sal, is a couple of short videos that look at what is the merchant marine. Everybody knows, I've heard it, but they don't know what it is. Maybe a couple of short videos on the different styles of ships out there. Because I realize I get into conversation. One of the things I really want to do is explain things to everybody who has maybe a really great interest in the industry, but people who don't have an interest in the industry. So that's one of the things I really want to do with this channel is develop it in this way. So I had a couple of questions I wanted to address because I had a couple of people prior to the video come in and announce that they had a couple of questions. So I want to make sure I cover them. So one of the first questions I got, which was a really good one, was the question about ships waiting off the ports. Is that still an issue? And the answer is yes. Still an issue right now. Last look, and I looked at it just the other day, was Port of LA and Long Beach were still sitting at roughly about 40 ships off the port. Now, that's nowhere near the peak we saw back in November when there was 101 ships off the port. But understand, prior to COVID, Port of LA and Long Beach had maybe 1-2 ships waiting off the port on a normal basis. So this is a substantial, still big delay going on. We've seen delays off the ports of Savannah, less so off the port of Charleston, but we are seeing delays still existing. But we're in a really weird period. If you've been following the news, you know about the lockdowns in China, and if you haven't had a chance to do it yet, I interviewed Madeline Walchko, who's the second mate on an American container ship, the motor vessel President Wilson, that is stuck in a lockdown in Shanghai. Her series, Restricted to Ship, is on YouTube. I have the links to it from my videos. You can go take a look at them. Really a stark kind of image about what's going on during lockdowns in China. And a lot of great questions people ask me about that too. about why an American ship is in China in a shipyard. There's a lot to do with the fact that the maritime infrastructure of the United States can't support the ships it does have. And so, in the case of the President Wilson, that ship operates between the US West Coast, Japan, Korea, and China. It makes sense for it to go into a shipyard overseas. They have to pay 50% taxed on the work there, but a Chinese shipyard is cheap, state subsidized, there's no profit. So that they decided to go in there, and now they find themselves stuck due to COVID. But the issue we were talking about a second ago, why is that important? Well, right now we're clearing the backlog out of some of the ports, which is great. We needed to do that. We had huge backlogs in the ports. However, what's waiting to come out of China is a tsunami of ships coming across, and that has the potential to create a new wave of vessels coming this way, which could really create the thing we saw last summer, these huge backlogs coming into US ports. Now, fortunately, shippers, the people who haul cargo or book cargo on ocean carriers, have learned a lesson. A lot of that cargo is now not just coming into LA and Long Beach, but it's coming through the Panama Canal, for example, over to the West Coast, or over to the East Coast, which is great. However, you got to be really careful about that, because if that happens, you're going to see more ships come through the Panama Canal, and we can see those backlogs happen on the East Coast, not just the West Coast. So we'll see how that plays out. So a lot of issues going on. And again, if you want, throw a question into the chat. I see a lot of people in here in the chat. I'm really happy to see this group. We got almost 100 people coming in here now to talk. And one of the things I really want to do again is talking about this, the channel, is really create a routine to the channel. As you know, about every Monday or Tuesday, I post my What the Ship, the top 5 news stories. And one of the things I like to do is be able to post these stories, that kind of gives you the weekend review up to this point. So nice. I try to get them under 30 minutes. I apologize. Sometimes I talk too much. I know. But usually I try to get it in there for 30 minutes. And then midweek, another big story, kind of take a story and unravel it, maybe do about a 30-minute video on it or so. Throw a short little video in there, and then maybe a longer one for the weekend. That's the plan. 2 to 3 videos a week. The one big huge recap with what the ship, and then maybe longer, shorter videos in there looking at some topics. I kind of went a little bit off range this past week with the Bonhomme Richard fire. If you haven't watched that and you want to see me just really out of control talking on a subject, and for those of you who watched that, I apologize. But man, that subject gets me really mad. I mean, it really does. The amount of errors in that fire are just incredible. And I got to say, I was worried about that video for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was I expected a lot of negative criticism for it. I got to say, everything I've gotten from everybody has been fantastic. It's been really good. And I'm not talking about just, passerbys watching the video. I'm talking about people who have experience in the Navy talking about it. And I actually had again, one of the things that's great about YouTube is that you can get people who know topics or can explain topics, and not perfectly. I'm by no means perfect. There are a lot of other great maritime people out there who do some great subject matter expertise out there. But one of the things that I liked is my ability to bring these material together and be able to synthesize it into a nice little packet that you all can understand and share. And I got a great note from a Navy officer who was sharing it with his wardroom, which to me was really good. I was really happy about that. All right, that's enough me yammering on. My job here is to answer questions to you. So running down the list, and everybody first, hello, QA library. Let's see. I got to put my glasses on so I can see. Avatar 2000, ahoy! Good to see you too. Possum Mule, yes, there obviously wasn't much going on with shipping. Maritime Hawaii, how you doing, buddy? Plebsite, good to see you. Jim, good to see you too, sir. CJ, going down the list. A lot of great people here, a lot of names that I am very familiar with. And so I'm happy to see all these names here. I'm going to keep going down here a little bit. Plebiscite, your video on Bonhomme Richard was awesome, by the way. Very interesting. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. When I get compliments like that, I don't take them lightly. So I appreciate that. Jamie O, great channel. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Dale Rushton. Hello, Sal. Hi, everybody. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everybody out there, too, again. Let's see. Going down the list here. Plebsite, you're the best channel for the state of merchant shipping that I found. I appreciate that. I don't think there's very many. I don't have huge competition out there, but I do appreciate that. Let's see. Going to keep going down the list here. Wow. Oh, Dave Dempsey. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Dave. That it's nice to contribute to the channel. I really do appreciate that. Let's see. QA library. Has anyone worked out all the stuff that went straight to landfill because it was damaged, went off, unable to be used due to long wait at U.S. ports? So that's a really interesting question, QA library, because I got to tell you, the amount of insurance claims going against cargo that's late coming in has been extraordinary. And it's one of the reasons why I expect to see much higher freight rates going forward. Even if everything returned back to normal, freight rates would not. And a large part of that has to do with the insurance. There was a lot of goods that literally arrived after holidays and timed events, and they were no longer needed. There was a great story, and I wish I had it on. I'd share it with you. I have to pull it up, but there was furniture that was delivered real late in the season last year, and basically it bypassed the main stores, went right to consignment, and so you can get fairly brand new couches because new couches were scheduled to come in, new designs were coming in, and so a lot of material like that did that, but a lot of material is required by time, either spoilage or time sensitive, and what has happened now is more people are getting insurance on that cargo, which means insurance rates are going to go up because again, one of the things that we've seen is while rates have gone up, reliability has gone down. We used to have about 70-80% reliability of the arrival of containers. Now we're down to 30-40%. It's coming back up a little bit, but still not quite there where we want it to be. All right, I want to keep going on because I do want to ask questions. And Dave, if you'd like to ask a question, please do. Jim Bergen, any update in the labor negotiations? Could be as bad as Shanghai opens. Well, Jim is highlighting a big issue with the ILWU. This is the International Longshoremen and Warehouse Union on the West Coast. Understand the ILWU isn't just Los Angeles and Long Beach, the entire West Coast. And we saw two notes come out to the past couple of days. One's from the PMA, the Pacific Maritime Association. They represent the shippers and all the cargo carriers that come in. The PMA is huge. All the major ocean lines, the terminals, you name it, they're all together in that. And then the ILWU are the workers. Now, everybody's saying the same exact thing. They expect nothing but the best. They're going to get an agreement. There's no fear because for those of you who don't know, on June 30th, the current union agreements on the West Coast expire. They're done. And July 1st is a new union period. This was due actually almost actually more than that. It was back in 2016. They were supposed to renegotiate and they extended it out. And I don't think we're going to see a strike. I don't think on July 1st, if there's no agreement, there's going to be a strike. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I do think is going to happen is number one, both sides are already saying the same thing. No worries, we're in agreement. Now, understand they haven't met yet. They've had a couple of preliminary kind of discussions, but they are scheduled to meet this week for the first full time of negotiations. And the big issue at play here is automation. Automation. Now, I'm not talking about automating a port where you eliminate the workers. That's kind of not what we're talking about. When we talk about automation in containers, for example, you're looking at the Long Beach Container Terminal. LBCT in Long Beach is the most efficient container terminal in LA and Long Beach by far. By far. They move twice as many containers as everybody else. A lot of the automation is handled by container cranes moving containers within the yard and from off the ship into holding areas. There has to be more automation. Now, what a lot of people are saying is that more automation doesn't eliminate jobs. It actually, you need more jobs, is what they argue, because if you start moving more containers, you're going to require more jobs. That's yes and yes and no. Yes, you're going to need more jobs. No, you're not going to need the same jobs you have now, and that's the problem. That there may be a phase out of jobs that will have a detrimental effect on this, and that issue of automation has got to happen. One of the big issues we talk about in containers and ocean shipping is data. Every ocean carrier has their own system. They don't share data very well. Excuse me. They have to be open for everybody to communicate, which makes them susceptible to cyber attacks. And this negotiation is key. We've already heard that the Secretary of Labor is on standby to come in and help with the negotiation, should it be. The worst case scenario, absolute 100% worst case, is negotiations break down and there's a strike on June 30th. That is holy hell bad. Let me be clear. That would mean no movement of container on the West Coast. That's the worst. And not just containers, cars, bulk, you name it. Everything comes to a screeching halt. That is worst case. I don't see that happening at all. No, that's not. Best case is they come up with an agreement. Everything goes fine. We're not going to be either one of those two. We're going to be in the middle. They're going to be hashing out some agreements here to come at it. And it's going to require some issues. Look at the labor market right now. Go into any store around the United States right now, and they're looking for labor. Labor's in the driving seat right now, and the ILWU is going to be in the driver's seat to get better agreements on the West Coast, and we're going to see that happen. So I expect to see some very vigorous negotiations coming on. I also think we're not going to hear a lot about it, but between companies and unions, they're going to leak like a sieve. We're going to hear a lot of leaking coming out. And I would expect to see the Secretary of Labor, if not the president himself, eventually intervene to make sure that there's not an issue here. It's the great variable. And understand this is one of the reasons why we can expect to see a lot of shipping come this way, because everybody's going to want to get in here before June 30th. Jim, I hope that answered the question. It's a tough one to come up with, but that's my best estimate of the situation right now. Kathleen, hello from New Mexico. There's a Mercogliano in New Mexico. My brother works at the University of New Mexico. Let's see. Coming in. Hello from Minnesota. Man, we're all over the place. Let's see. George D, the way things are headed, you could stay busy just covering groundings and ship fires. Yeah. Let's talk about groundings and ship fires, because we have had a lot of them. First off, everybody who came on board during the Ever Forward, I appreciate that. That was an interesting story. Not done, by the way, with Ever Forward, because the issue with general average is still lingering out there. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with groundings and fires on ships. And that's been the case throughout history. We just seem to know them a lot better now. However, I will caveat this: the types of groundings and fires we're seeing are much more severe because of the size of the vessels. And they have the potential to go very bad very quickly. Again, I used the case of the Zim Kingston that was off Vancouver, Canada. That container fire was handled. Fortunately, there were two large vessels there that were involved in the ocean cleanup process, able to come in, able to get that fire out. Flip side that with the video I did early or late last year on the Express Pearl, which basically caught on fire, got the fire out, rekindled the fire, and then sank off of Colombo, Sri Lanka. That was a horrific fire because of the amount of environmental damage associated with it. I am very concerned that we are not learning lessons from previous accidents. Maritime law is written in blood, and we tend not to learn anything until something bad happens. I mean, again, everybody knew Titanic did not have enough lifeboats on board, but it took Jack drowning for us to realize, well, probably a good idea to put more lifeboats on these things. That's what it takes. And in many ways, it's the same thing, whether it's Golden Ray capsizing in St. Simon Sound, Casa Concordia going aground off of Giglio in Italy. These are lessons we have to learn. And Everforward is a great example of that. I've talked to Bill Doyle, the CEO of the Port of Baltimore. He has promised to come on the show and talk about issues with Everforward and the Port of Baltimore. It's really amazing the reach this channel gets sometimes. I am always amazed by it. And the amount of people who contact me out of the cold and want to come on and talk about it. If you saw some of the interviews we've done just this year, I started off with John Conrad. I had Jay Mintzmeyer on for that. But the recent one with Megan Milligan Biven talking about dredging was a great one. I thought it was a really interesting take on dredging. And that's a very important issue. I know it's not sexy. No, no one gets excited about a dredge, but it's a really important issue for us to do. Let's see. Let's keep trucking along here. Let's see. I'm going to keep running through here. Some great questions here and everything, and I appreciate it. Kaz, good to see you, sir. My favorite diver down in Cozumel, talking about the fireboats down in Cozumel. Yeah, I gotta say, I wasn't gonna do those videos on Bonhomme Richard. I went on a podcast and talked about that fire a while ago, and I put it aside because, like, you know what, I don't want to burn bridges with the Navy. I'm gonna say something I knew was gonna really get me amped up. But when I saw the letter from the Navy Installations Command on fireboats and sitting there saying we have sufficient fireboat capacity, that was it. I mean, that was written by someone who didn't understand what fireboats did and what they could do. And that went to a member of Congress. That went to Adam Smith in the Congress. And that just absolutely kind of irked me to the wrong way, to the point that I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to go ahead and say something. I'm a tenured professor. I can say things. And so I decided to go ahead and do those 2 episodes. And if you hadn't had a chance to look at them, they're long. I know. I apologize. Let's see. Neem Tree. I'm no novice on this. I'm glad you share info in understandable terms for people like me who care but don't know anything. I find that hard to believe. You know something. I watch your brave video. Kudos to those in your field who are backing you. Yeah, it's great. I get some pushback, and that's fine. Listen, I'm the first one to tell you I don't know everything. I really don't. I try to do my research as good as I can. I contact industry experts. I've got a lot of great contacts out there from my years sailing and where I went to school at SUNY Maritime College. But I'm going to make mistakes. But the whole purpose for the channel was to create dialogue, to open up the avenues of communication so that we can understand an industry that is really cloaked behind secrecy. Unfortunately, the most people see of shipping is if they go on a cruise ship, but most people don't see it. And let me be clear. Again, the problem I have with people in almost any field, but particularly the maritime field, is they're great at talking to each other. They're terrible at talking to people outside the field. And that's what I try to do. I try to take a very complex issues, boil them down, don't make them simple, don't dumb them down. That's not what I do, but make them understandable so everybody can see it. But more importantly, how does it relate to you? If you're living, got people talking about being from all over the place. How does it affect you where you live? Why is ocean shipping important if I'm living in Minnesota? And I would make the argument it's as vital as if you live in New York or North Carolina, where I'm at, or California, or in one of the major ports. It is just as critical. Let's see. Let's see. Iron Darkness. Want to talk about the Port Royal cruiser? I'm not sure what you mean by the Port Royal. Are you talking about the U.S. USS Port Royal? Not exactly sure. Just clarify that if you mind. I'll come back to it. QA library looks like the U.S. Navy needs a big shakeup like the Royal Navy did after the ships caught fire when hitting the Falklands War. So, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I got a great video coming up. I got it in my head. I hadn't filmed it yet, but the 40th anniversary of the sinking of the Atlantic Conveyor, which was a container ship converted into an aircraft carrier for the Falklands War. Absolutely incredible story. Ship went down to the Falklands, brought Sea Harriers, brought heavy lift helicopters, and unfortunately got hit by Argentinian Exocet missiles. Ship was lost. Part of the crew was killed. The captain was killed. Just a absolute. But what I really want to talk about is the merchant ships supporting the operation for both the British and also the Argentinians. The Argentinians actually modified several commercial ships to use down there, but the British in particular was really a fascinating story. Peter Gold, when do you think you'll do another podcast with the bilge pumps? Peter, I can tell you that right now. The time now is 5:30. 12 hours from now. 12 hours from now, I'm getting up in the morning, and we're doing a bilge pumps filming or recording on the Black Sea. We're going to be talking about the Black Sea, the Moskva sinking, commercial shipping in the Black Sea. Snake Island, is Snake Island Iron Bottom Sound? Is it becoming the Guadalcanal campaign? Jamie, DRAC, and Alex have always been nice. They invite me on a fairly routine basis, which I think is good. I mean, someone needs to speak English correctly on the bilge pumps. When you got two British guys and an Australian guy, it's just not American enough. And it is my job to get on there with several other folks to try to keep them straight where they are. DRAC just got back. If you don't know who DRAC is, he has got a YouTube channel that puts mine to shame. Just came back from an America tour, went on almost every capital museum ship there is. Really jealous about it. But some great guys. Each of those three guys run their own YouTube channels. Drac does naval history. Jamie does armored carriers, talks about the British armored carriers in World War II. And Alexander Clark, Dr. Clark, is a naval historian. He does a great naval history channel. So keep trucking along here. Let's see. Indy Loveless. Good to see you, sir. Having regular conversations with Madeline per your connection, doing what I can to boost spirits from afar. Man, again, if you hadn't seen the Restricted to Ships with Madeline, she's great. Absolutely fantastic. Follow her on YouTube, on Instagram. Just a great kid. Just a really, really sad story, I got to say. It's just, I really feel bad for them. I've been in a shipyard. My two shipyards were in Charleston, South Carolina, and Marseille, France. I was in a much better position than being stuck in Shanghai, where they are. Understand, even when lockdowns end in Shanghai, they're still 30 days from getting out of there. It's going to be a real big problem for them. George, can you say something about the Russian nuclear torpedo you can set off schematic? Schematic. Thanks, Saul. Well, Russian do have nuclear torpedoes. I'm not sure which ones you're talking about here. Nuclear torpedoes were developed by both sides in the Cold War, U.S. and the Soviets. And obviously the Russians still have them. There was several underwater detonations of these things, really dangerous. One of the things that you have to remember is water doesn't compress, so that you create not seismic waves, but huge shock waves that go through the ocean, and due to density of water and convergence zones, they send out these radiuses of shock. Absolutely nasty. I'm really concerned about what's happening in the Black Sea. I know I talk about the commercial side, obviously Ukraine being blockaded, the fact that we're not getting the grain out of there we need to. Now, Ukraine is now shifting grain down to Romania. They just sailed the bulker out of Constanta. However, that is a drop in the bucket in terms of tonnage there. I think there is a concern that I have that if the Ukrainians keep targeting Russian ships, it could spill over toward targeting Russian commercial ships or ships carrying Russian cargo. That has the potential to turn the Black Sea into the Persian Gulf of the 1980s during the tanker war. And I think escalation is a potential problem. I'm really amazed. The one place I get a lot of pushback on that it really surprises me more than anything else is my discussion about U.S. and NATO role in Black Sea. I'm not arguing to put NATO and the U.S. Navy off the Gulf of Odessa, into the Sea of Azov. However, I do think we should have a presence in the Black Sea, helping Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey protect their sovereignty, protect their shores, deal with these mine issues, and to provide rescue for vessels should they be attacked in the Black Sea. I understand that could lead to a potential confrontation. However, Navy vessels are supposed to go into harm's way, and I'm not talking about going toe to toe with the Russians. That's not what we're talking about here. But there are issues out there to really be aware of. We keep trucking along here. Did not know you could get that insurance cover. Thank you. Oh, okay. Keep going here. T, I'm working through the fire report and already have additional comments. Too bad the exhibits are not available. We'll forward an email. Yeah, the amount of exhibits and enclosure, that the Jagman investigation is 450 pages, along with a slew of other documents. Would love to take a look at them in their entirety. Just again, it's a report that when you read it, it makes me just absolutely livid. In case you haven't seen the video and you really want to see me lose it and use some salty language, mind you, too. I did lose it. I think my favorite comment I made in that video was I was reading a comment about command and control. I think the Navy assessed that command and control was deficient in the firefighting on board the Bonhomme Richard, and my comment was no shit. It was pretty clear about it. And again, it can be clear. The one thing about that fire that still gets me, and I'm getting all worked up again about it, is the fact that CO is still in the Navy. I don't understand it. I don't understand not only that he's still in the Navy, but that he is basically never been charged with anything. Yet the only person charged is an E1 who is identified coming out of the lower V deck, before the fire started. That was his crime there. And he's being prosecuted, nobody else. Just absolutely amazing. Let's see. Hethy World, I really want to see that text message. I swear I would pay money to see that text message. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, when the ship's fire on the Bonhomme Richard had the fire, there was a text sent from the command duty officer to the CO of the vessel. That's how the CO was notified that his ship was on fire. They've never released that text. And I joked about what that text would be. Good morning, Captain. Hope your Sunday's going good. Ship on fire. Frowny emoji. I also wanted to sit there and say, career poop emoji, but I didn't go that far, but I did it now. So now you know the exact level of my jokes that I would take it for. Let's see. Keep going. Let's see. Texas Lobo, thanks for the great channel. Oh, you're welcome. Appreciate that, sir. Kathleen McCormick, it would be good to know where all that late stuff went to. We could not know where to buy. Yeah, where everything's going right now is just amazing. Mark, any insight on bulk carriers, especially cement? Mark, it's so funny. I try to really balance it, but containers have taken up so much of my time. I do try to hop onto the bulk market and talk about it a lot. Same thing with tankers. I need to get a little bit more on it. I apologize. Sometimes where the news goes kind of pushes me in my views, and you're seeing the entire staff here at what's going on with shipping. Although Peanut and Macy are not here right now, they're downstairs in the playroom with my son. But yeah, I can definitely take a look at that and get you some more info on it. I'd be happy to do that. Plebsite, Sal and Bonhomme Richard, are the fire trucks not able to take water from the sea? I'm sure there's a basic capability on UK fire trucks taking water. Yeah, I didn't mention that enough, and I probably should have. So most fire trucks have what's called hard suction tubes, so that you can put them. My fire trucks have that, so I can put them into a pond, a pool, and get water out of it. The problem you had in San Diego is this: number one, the trucks were too high above the water. That you can only pull what's called a 20-foot. It's called head suction. I apologize, but that's what's called head suction. So you can only have 20 feet from basically where you pull it into the truck down to the end of the suction. And the problem was the pier was above that. And especially if you got to lay that hose out, you're not going to be able to pull it. And if you got to pull more than 20 feet, you're not going to get good suction, and you're not going to pull the water like you need. That's why I argued you needed a pipe, and more importantly, a high capacity pump. Most fire trucks pumps are between 1,000 to 2,000 gallons per minute of water. You probably need a much higher suction pump and discharge pump to get it. But that's why they didn't do that. But they should. I mean, there should be a provision for them to do that of some kind. It just amazes me that that wasn't in place there. Let's see. Iron Darkness. Anyone know the rough construction cost for the Dale Pyatt dredge? Dale Pyatt dredge was the one used on the Ever Forward. Not sure, but if you go over to Don John Smith website, they have the equipment on there. Maybe it'll pull that up. And actually, one of the best sites I know is a site called shipbuildinghistory.com, which actually documents all ships built in the United States. They may have the Dale Pyatt who built it and have the cost there. I'll have to check. I'm not sure. I'll be sure to take a look, and I can check that out. Rich, lots of bulkers with cement here on the lakes, lots of stone as well. Yeah, well, I mentioned that story the other day about the bulker going into Michigan that grounded. Interesting story. I try to catch stories when they happen and get some information out there. And my goal is to not just provide you what's out there in the news, but a little backdrop on it, a little background. If it's a 30-second, 1-minute story on the national news, I'll try to do 5 to 15 minutes and round it out. And I've been trying to do more on the Great Lakes. Great Lakes is America's fourth coast. You have the East, the West, the Gulf Coast, but the Great Lakes and then the inland waterways are a tremendous maritime asset. And I'm going to recommend something to all of you right now. Don't go away. So I did a review a few months ago on books. Great book. This book right here. I know it's kind of coming up backwards. I apologize. I don't know why the camera is doing this. I'll have to figure out why the camera's throwing thing backwards here. But the book's entitled The Way of the Ship, America's Maritime History, Re-envisioned 1600 to 2000. What I love about this book, Alex Rowland is the author, is that's a maritime history of the United States, but it's not just international blue water, it's brown water. He makes the argument, great argument in the introduction, where it's not just 2 years before the mast that should be the literature book, but also Mark Twain's writings on the Mississippi. Great book. Please take a look at it. I strongly recommend it. I used it in my maritime history courses in the past. Covers parts of the Great Lakes, just an amazing amount of history. I really want to bring on, one of my goals again over the summer is to talk to maritime historians on each of the coasts, in particularly from the maritime academies, and talk about shipping on the Great Lakes, shipping on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, on the West Coast, and bring a little more history into it, but also put it into the context of the modern day. Hope that helps, Rich. John Conrad on board here. John, good to see you, sir. Jerome, hello from Maine. I love Maine, one of my favorite places in the world, except in the wintertime. John from Alberta, good to see you, sir. Orion from Ohio. Thoughts on the Sullivans? So, if you hadn't been following the Sullivans, I did an update at the beginning of what's the ship, if not this week, last week. So, they've been able to patch the hull and refloat her. So, she is back up and floating at this time. So, what happened, and it's really an interesting story what happened. So, the ship is on the Buffalo River, feeds into Lake Erie. They had a really low water event. Tide got really low there because of issues on Lake Erie. And the ship's hull was undergoing a refurbishment. They had identified and surveyed several areas where the vessel needed work. I mean, she's 80 years old, a Fletcher class destroyer, one of only 4 left in the world. There's one in Greece. There is the Sullivans in Buffalo. There's the Cassin Young in Charlestown, alongside or across from the Constitution in Massachusetts, and then the Kid in Baton Rouge. And one of the things that happened is they believe the ship may have touched bottom when the tide went out, and that caved in part of the hull. And that was the catastrophic flooding that the vessel had. It's really hard to maintain museum ships. They're just really expensive, and especially coming out of COVID has been really expensive. If you haven't followed the Battleship New Jersey site, I strongly recommend it to you. Their curator had done an amazing job over the past 2 years developing a YouTube channel. And he's lucky. He's got the backdrop of a battleship to do his YouTube channel. So, he can go right to the site and say, here's the gun turret, here's the engine, and show you everything. I've got my office, which isn't quite the same, but really good. Szymanski, I think is his last name. Ryan Szymanski. He's also the president of the Historical Naval Ships Association. But he really talks about the difficulty in preserving historical vessels. And, I'm really excited that the Sullivans is back up again. I love the story of the 5 Sullivan brothers. If you've seen my video on that, I talk about that a lot. I had a clip to the movie, The Fighting Sullivans. It makes me blubber every time. I'm not going to lie. That movie kills me every time that the 5 brothers die, even though they don't die the way they did in the movie. The movie's historically wrong in how they died. And I talked about it in the video I did on the Sullivans. But just a great story, and really happy. I got a really nice note, by the way, from the museum curator. He sent me a note really appreciating the fact that I was highlighting it, bringing attention to it, which I'm happy to do. I think we're almost at 45,000 subscribers now. I lose track actually how many. It gets to the point where I just kind of lose track of where we're at, because I'm just absolutely floored by it. 43,000 subscribers, over 4 million views. Just absolutely phenomenal. Just thank you, everybody, if I don't say that enough. Let's see, Ed Bonham Richard wants to know what was not in these reports. Significant risks. What about the ammunition, rockets, and bombs? Were there any nukes on board? No, the ship had just come out of NASCO, the shipyard. So this is really another big interesting thing I didn't even mention in the video, and I guess I should have, is there was hesitation on the part of the firefighters, Fed Fire, San Diego Fire, about, are we risking our lives? What is on this vessel? And nobody, I think, actually told them that the ship had just come out of a shipyard. So there was barely fuel. They had very minimal fuel on board, just enough to really run pumps and engines. So no ammunition on board. The ship was still, had about a few more months of shipboard work to do. Plus, this is the beginning of COVID, so everything was running behind. So no, there was no danger of that. And nukes have supposedly been removed from all surface vessels since the 90s. Moving on here, Neem Tree. Google is blocking my accounts to process a donation. Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. My flash drive case, writer, and all SD cards come up missing when I went to New York City a few days ago. I hope it's found. Well, I hope you have a good one for that. I apologize about that, but I appreciate any donation that contributes to the page. Keep going on here. I'm going to keep jumping around here. A lot of great questions and comments. I just want to get to the questions. Uh, let's see. Dave Koontz, will land explosion and fire lead to more ship fires? Well, I think we're going to see ship fires. Obviously, I do think one of the big things we're going to see on ships, if you go back to the ship fire video I did on the Felicity Ace, the car carrier, lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are a huge problem we're seeing right now on board vessels with cargo, containers, you name it. It's just a big problem. Keep going here. Let's see. Keep looking here. Just read. I apologize. Just trying to catch up here and read a little bit here of questions. Is the Navy going to appreciably learn from Bonhomme Richard? God, I wish I knew that answer. That's a great question. It's one of those ones where you think they would learn from it. I just don't know. I get really concerned that the Navy doesn't want to learn from these answers. You know, they had a fire. I mentioned it in the video in 2012. I think it was on the Miami, a nuclear submarine. It was an arson fire up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and a lot of the things that should have been done weren't done at that time. So it's really amazing to me that that was not done. Let's see, going on here. Dredging was top of the news for weeks on end in Portsmouth when they were there making room for the aircraft carriers. They were finding things that go boom. Yeah, I mean, dredging is so critical. Again, I have a big problem with the infrastructure bill that we're talking about. And again, you know, if you watch some of the earlier videos when we're talking about infrastructure and ports, you know, understand the waters of the United States are controlled by the federal government. The ports are controlled by state and municipal governments. And sometimes there's not a lot of coordination between those two. And when you don't have coordination between those two, what that means is, you know, some goals are set out that aren't appreciably being met by other ones. It doesn't do you any good to dredge to 50 feet if you're not building port facilities to handle these vessels. So why waste that money in there? Darlin, 928, until they've determined the Everforth grounding, who's responsible for all the dredging towing costs? So still, again, you're going to be going again. How is it the NTSB and Coast Guard have said absolutely squat on Everforward? I mean, seriously, can I be clear? They know what happened. They have to know what happened. That ship went straight out of the channel, didn't make a right turn, a 30-degree right turn from 150 degrees to 180 degrees. There's only two things that do that. One, mechanical. That should be ruled out. And if it was mechanical, they could say mechanical, steering gear failure, engine failure, something. They would say that. It's not. It's got to be human failure. And if it's human failure, then the question is, who is the human failure? Was it the pilot? Was it the ship's crew? And that goes back to cause and liability. Who is liable then for the accident? And this is why they don't want to say anything. The NTSB at the Coast Guard refuse to say anything. Listen, I know Chesapeake pilots. I have heard rumors, but they are not talking. And believe me, pilots love to talk. They do. They love to talk. And these guys and women are not talking about this because somebody screwed up here. And the question is, who screwed up here? And again, let's be clear. As soon as the Coast Guard went on board, that ship got grounded. They would have drug tested everybody, gotten written statements from them. They would have seized the DVR, the VDR, the vessel data recorder, which has the communications on the bridge. So they would have heard everything. They would have had all the data from the ship's instruments. They know what's happened. They just have not yet come out and said it because they're going to make sure everything is in a row. But it doesn't matter because the NTSB still gets things wrong. Watch my video on Golden Ray's NTSB report, which I think is just absolutely amazing that they didn't talk to anybody who's ever worked on a car carrier in their life to tell them the ship didn't ballast and why it didn't ballast and just all those issues associated with it. But when it comes to cost, Evergreen, who owns and operates that vessel, is assuming the burden along with their insurance companies right now. The owners of the cargo would have had to pay a bond to get the cargo off, claim it, but that could come back and put a lien against that cargo in the future. So this is why I'm saying that this situation has not been resolved yet. I mean, Ever Given in the Suez hasn't been resolved yet. All right, keep going here. Plebsite 2 45-minute videos long. Ha! I come from I come from DRAC Q&A that are 5 hours long. You're putting up yeah, I know. Compared to DRAC can go like marathon sessions. I can't do that, but I appreciate that. Let's see. I keep going here. Hello from the Eurozone. That's always great to have somebody from overseas. Let's see. Lancaster in Shanghai. Does she know which tastes better, dog or cat? If those of you who have never traveled to China, the food, or Asia in general, the food is always a great challenge. Iron Doctors. Yes, great pick of her. Okay, so you were talking about the Port Royal, the cruiser that came out and grounded. Yeah. It's amazing again. The US Navy has had a rash of issues. And I guess my biggest problem I have with the issues is they seem to handle them in isolation instead of looking at the larger systemic problem. If you go back to the McCain and the Fitzgerald, the two US destroyers that were involved in collisions in 2017, you only got to go a few years before that to see a collision with a ship called the Porter in the Persian Gulf, which was a disaster. I mean, it was a terrible disaster, but no one lost their lives. Yet there was systematic problems going on with the Navy throughout this. And listen, I love the Navy. I really do. I write naval history. A lot of my research is all on navies. My wife was in the Navy. I met my wife because I was working for the Navy. But it really bothers me that the Navy does not take serious look at the systematic problems they're having. It's system wide. It's not an isolated issue. On the USS McCain, what happened with the McCain is she was coming into Shanghai, something that many ships do, and they slowed down. And when they slowed down, literally when they slowed down the engines, one engine slowed down, the other didn't, and they didn't realize that was happening. And, they want to blame the people on the helm control for that because they couldn't understand the helm control. I've got a 13-year-old. If I give a 13-year-old a Nintendo controller and I flip the buttons around, he's going to figure it out in 2 seconds. No, it was the command and control that didn't realize what to do and how to fix it. And I think that's one of the big problems we're seeing here. I keep going on here. Let's see. A couple of great DRAC fans here. It's good to hear that. Jamie O, Sal, your episodes could be longer. Each episode has been extremely interesting. Well, I appreciate that, Jamie. But at the same time, I got a lot of comments that they should be shorter. Let's see. QA library. Looks like the Ukrainians hit and set fire to the newest Russian ship in the back. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I've seen a lot of different things about that. I'm just not 100% sure about that. I do believe, but that we're seeing a pretty good fight for the Black Sea developing. Let's see. Avatar 2000, you're exactly right. My apologies. Duluth is a major port. Minnesota is a great seafaring state. Let's see. Orion, can you cover the Washington Naval Treaty in the future? Wow, great topic. It's funny. I did a video on the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, and in it, I talk about the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 because I make the argument that one of the reasons we pushed through the Merchant Marine Act of 1920 was to ensure our merchant marine could serve alongside the British. We were challenging them on that. And one of the reasons I argue that the Washington Naval Treaty was signed in 22 was because the British were very concerned that our merchant marine would eclipse theirs. And they were worried the same thing about the Navy. And so what did they want to do? They wanted to control the size of navies. And they pushed through the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922. Let's see. Keep going here. Question: what to believe, Ukraine or Russia? I don't believe either of them. They're at war. They're going to use propaganda to wage war. I think you have to raise questions about everything. One of the things I tell everybody, I'm a historian. I have history students. I tell them all the time, don't believe everything I say. You should go back and check everything I say. I can make mistakes. I have made mistakes. I've got a YouTube channel that has a catalog of my mistakes. Probably, but the way you minimize mistakes is by multiple sources. And so when Russia, Ukraine say something, you take it for a grain of salt, especially in wartime. and you verify. That's what you got to do. You got to go out and verify. Let's see, coming in. Oh, hello from Kauai, Hawaii. Mr. Q. Well, I'll be out your way at the end of July, early August. Family and I are taking a trip out there for our anniversary, 30 years. So we'll be heading out to beautiful Kauai. Jim, talking about Ukrainian wheat grain. If the war continues, I doubt there will be planting next year. Wheat this spring, then what? Listen, food, food, food. That is the big issue coming forward. Not just food out of Ukraine, but food out of Russia, fertilizer. This has got the potential to be the big issue. Myself and somebody named Ross Kennedy, who's on Twitter at Man Integrated, have talked about this issue quite a bit. We got in a little bit of a Twitter war with a agricultural scientist who made the argument, well, Russia and Ukraine only export 0.9% of total wheat production in the world. Yeah, but it's 25% almost of all the world wheat exports. And if your country is not growing wheat and you need wheat, that's a problem. And I think the food situation is the critical one. Add to it that the fields have been mined, they've been hit by artillery, tractors are out, food. I mean, it's just, and if you can't get to the Ukrainian ports, you can't get to Odessa, you can't get to Nikolaev, you can't get to all the major Kherson. You're not moving grain out. You're not going to move it by rail because Ukraine's railway system isn't compatible with European railway system. It's a different gauge. It's in the old Soviet system. And so just getting grain to Romania is a chore in itself. And the food situation is going to be critical. I also think that's one of the reasons why to watch the bulker sector, not the Cape Wise bulkers, the huge ore bulkers, but watch the grain bulkers. I think that those are vessels are going to be in much higher demand coming forward. And what happens, I'm watching them very carefully to see what they do. Let's see, keep going here. Uh, Let's see. Doug Wilson. Once all the ships get to West Coast from China, what does it mean for exports? More space and containers available, or will they keep containers only to go back to China? Man, Don, I have talked about this so much, and I agree with you entirely on a couple of issues. Number one, I looked at the Los Angeles dwell containers and empties just recently, and the number of containers that are dwelling is actually going up. It's not going down. It went down about November and December, and now it's going back up again because they still have 40 ships off the coast. They haven't cleared the backlog yet. And that's because the problem isn't so much now LA and Long Beach, it's the distribution centers in the inland. They can't take anything. They're full. And if you watch Craig Fuller over at Freightwaves, he's been talking about this trucking recession. And I love Craig. I think everything he does is right, except he's weird with planes. He thinks planes are better than ships. What the hell is he smoking? I mean, seriously, there's no way a plane is better than a ship. Plane are tiny. I mean, planes fly off ships. Ships don't fly off planes. I mean, by nature, then ships are better and cooler. But anyway, to get back to this issue, if you're not pulling the stuff out of the warehouses, there's no place to put the stuff, which means they sit in the terminals. And what we're seeing is the terminals fill back up again, which is exactly what happened last year. And that's you can look at one side of the marketplace and sit there and say, well, recession, economy slowing down, interest rates going up, people are buying less. Therefore, things are going to pile up in the warehouses. We're going to have less trucking. That's great. But everything that's been ordered, remember that thing that you push the button for on your phone, they have to order that 120 days in advance. So we're 3-4 months of goods still coming in. And because of the shutdowns due to the Chinese New Year, now because of COVID shutdowns, all that stuff is going to come piling this way. And it's going to overcome our ports, I think. That's my fear. That's my fear. Keep going here. Let's see. Gonna keep trucking down here a little bit. Let's see. I want to get some. Neem Tree. Well, thank you, Neem Tree. I appreciate the $20. Thank you so much. Thank you for extraordinary work. I can't do this much, but may as well give you a lump. Oh, I appreciate that. Listen, you don't have to give me anything. I appreciate that. I appreciate any support for the channel and everything. But that's very nice of you. I appreciate that. And, one of the things I tell people about contributions to the channel and my Patreons, I thank you so much. And everybody who watches and shares the channel, it does help me. If you're unaware of the maritime industry, just buying subscriptions to everything that's behind paywalls. My good buddy John Conrad runs G Captain. That's not a paywall. It's free. You can go there, look at every content. It's fantastic. However, there are some that are behind paywalls, and they get a lot of data from sources that are also behind paywalls. And so I appreciate that. It allows me to do that. And so your support goes to something worthwhile. I want you to be clear about that. Keep going here. Let's see here. I want to answer some questions here. Man, Pete, your channel is always interesting and your commentary well considered and strangely, seemingly well informed. I appreciate that. It's the seemingly part that makes me really happy about that. Keith Yoder, have you heard anything about the general average assessments for the Ever Forward? I have anecdotally heard uninsured owners paying $30,000 to get their containers. Any news on the litigation? Yeah, I've heard the same things, Keith. Again, one of the things that was really interesting is how many people don't know about general average who are booking cargo on container ships and had no idea that this insurance even existed. And then they find out about it. And understand, general average is not always needed. I mean, it's rare. It really is very rare. But when it happens, it has the potential to be catastrophic in terms of cost, and that's why it's worth the insurance to get it. Uh, the problem is the lien put on the cargo is we don't know what the final cost is going to be. The problem you have with Ever Given in the Suez is they still have not come up with a clear determination who caused the accident. Was it the pilots taking the ship into the canal in high winds when they shouldn't? Was it the ship's master? Usually it's always the ship's master. Ship's master is ultimately responsible. But if you go back to a story years ago on a ship called the Costco Busan, leaving out of Oakland, and it hit the Oakland Bay Bridge, the pilot on board there was actually found culpable and actually arrested in prison terms for oil spillage. So there's no clear delineation you hear about what exactly is going to happen in these cases. Keep going on here. Let's see. Jim, is the federal administration pushing for more USA produce and our products going out on ships? I know they weren't because of time, loading and unloading. Empties were quicker. Yeah. So the problem we have is there's a great story, and I think it was Lodestar did it, talking about U.S. agricultural exporters, how 31% of agricultural exports was basically being written off for insurance because they can't get it out because of spoilage. And this goes the World Shipping Council, which again, I don't know about you, but it's the most evil sounding entity I've ever heard, basically was not allowing container ships to sail with loaded containers. And this is because they wanted to get empty containers back to Asia, load them up quicker, send them back across the Pacific or to Europe, and get more money for those containers. That's what they wanted to do. And the World Shipping Council is vehemently lobbying and protesting against the Ocean Shipping Reform Act that would require ocean carriers to take a percentage of containers as full. In other words, if there's exports to go out, they have to take them. And what the World Shipping Council did is, and John Butler, who's their spokesman, is a nice guy. I've seen John. I've never met him yet, but I've seen John talk. He's a very smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. But I would argue he's playing a little bit of scare tactics in basically telling people that if you do this, you're going to cause freight rates to go up. You're going to cause negative impact. And I just think that that's trying to manipulate the system. I think the World Shipping Council is missing their tack. I really do. If they hire me as their PR guy, I would be sitting there talking about, listen, during the height of COVID, no ships stopped sailing. We helped keep the world, afloat during COVID-19. And, they should be touting their positives, not the negatives. I think it goes to the whole maritime industry misjudging their public relations, which is just terrible, in my opinion. They just don't know how to do it. Let's see, QA. Near me, I have the D-Day Museum and the Portsmouth Historic Dry Dock. If you need any help with the interview setting up, etc., just add. Oh, that'd be great. I appreciate that, QA. I appreciate that a lot. I'll be sure to let you know. Let's see. Redondo Beach, California. Salty Army saying, hey, nice to see you, Sean. Good to see you. Are all ships at sea controllable worldwide by any authority? So Tom asking a very quick, interesting question. Are ships at sea controllable worldwide by any authority? Not a specific one authority. There's no one authority that does it. Ships are registered in countries. That is the country that has authority over them, their laws, their jurisdiction. Supposedly, all ships meet to standards set by international organizations, and particularly the International Maritime Organization, the IMO of the United Nations. Uh, they have to meet certain regulations, for example, MARPOL for pollution, SOLAS for safety of life at sea. There's a whole series of these international regulations. When ships come into ports through what's called port state agreements, uh, and representatives from those nations can come on board to certify. So, for example, if you get a Panamanian ship comes into Miami, the U.S. Coast Guard, who is our port state authority, can go on board to ensure ships are meeting compliance with international regulations. Understand, you have a ship registered in Liberia, and that ship never goes to Liberia in its history, and no one from Liberia ever goes on it. It is just a payment that goes to a mailbox in Monrovia that then gets forwarded to the Liberian offices in either New York or DC. I forget where they're at now. But yeah, so the sea, there's a great book entitled The Lawless Sea out there. And there's another one called The Lawless Ocean that talk about the wild, wild west that is the world's oceans. There is a agreement entitled UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, ratified in 1982, and nearly every nation in the planet has ratified it, except for one major seafaring nation, I should mention. There is one major seafaring nation that, in direct violation of this, has not ratified it. Even though they say they follow it, they have not ratified it. And if you're sitting there going, well, who is it? Is it China? Is it Russia? It's the US. US. We're the one country really that's out there. Not the one. There's several others that have done it, but largely it's us. Uh, could you post a link to the bilge pumps you were talking about, please? I don't have it yet because we're going to film it in the morning, but I will be sure to post it and announce it and everything. And you can, of course, just go on to your podcast provider and type in bilge pumps, and you'll find I've been on the bilge pumps 5 or 6 times now and everything. I think I have the record for the most guest appearances on there. I want to move on here because we're getting a little bit at the hour here. See, Justin was stationed on the Bonhomme Richard and had duty that day. Would love to chat with you about it. Justin, please do and everything. I will post my email address for the channel. It's a Gmail account, mercoglianosal at Gmail. It should be at gmail.com. I didn't even do my thing right. I apologize. I'll post that again. There we go. Mercoglianosal at gmail.com. Going on here. Do you think the U.S. will make changes? I don't know, Texas, if they're going to make those changes. Keep going on here. Rich, Drac, and Ryan did a video together on the New Jersey. Yeah, I actually saw that video on it. It was funny. They did that video just as I was filming my video. So I actually sent a note to Drac and Ryan about that. So I wanted to make sure not to overlap on what they were doing with theirs. Let's see. John Conrad. Sorry, I missed the beginning. I was in a Twitter fight with Navy officers about sending ships in the Black Sea. If you hadn't followed John Conrad on Twitter, you really should. It's fun. Not the least of which is watching Navy officers yell at John. It's great. It's great entertainment. I really strongly recommend it for everybody. Commander Sweeper. Yes, the only nuclear capable missiles that fit on surface ships back in the day were the Tomahawk. But in the modern theater and the ranges it provided, it's obsolete as nuclear. Yeah, it's true. They don't use it anymore. Keep going here. Let's see. Oh, everybody's being very nice. I appreciate everybody saying this. Harrison Williams, Sunny Point Fire Department did a better job in 2000 when that ammo ship caught fire at Matsu. Yeah, that was a Army prepositioning ship that caught fire. I would argue, I agree with you 100% about that. I've actually looked at that fire and talked to the fire department down there about that. They did a absolutely stellar job on that one. A really tough one, engine room fire, but they got it under control. There's a lot to it. I can't go into just the nonstop Bonhomme Richard, although maybe we'll do an episode just on that. That may be a fun one to do, just talking about it. Would love to see a miniseries on future alternative fuels. You seem to have a lot of content. Mark, there's so much to talk about with that. You are exactly right. I just don't know where they're going with it right now. Right now, there's plans to decarbonize ocean shipping down to 50% by 2050 with potential to go zero by 2050. And the amount of money that is being funneled out there is absolutely incredible. And it's changing so much that I'm just really shocked. I'm really shocked about the amount of money and what's going to happen. We're talking about ammonia, hydrogen, battery power, hybrid. I had a student who did a paper on container ships loading battery packs the size of containers on board, which is really an amazing idea to think about using hybrid battery pack. The way you load, batteries into. I bought a electric lawnmower not too long ago to hand mow an area of my yard. And because I didn't need a gas mower, but the electric one works great. Just put the battery pack in, charge it, and off you go, and you mow. It's great. It works fantastic. Don't get me wrong, I just bought a big, huge gas one too. So it's just for my yard. I need a big gas one. But that just worked out really well for me. It's easy maintenance. I don't have to worry about carburetors and fuel. Just boom, pop it in. And he had this idea for, literally 20-foot, 40-foot containers full of batteries and plugging them in as you come into port and you expend that power, you take them off. They go to, hook into shore power. They charge back up. In the meantime, you have other battery packs you load on board. There's a lot of innovative ideas out there. It's really incredible. And, fortunately, I do a class with marine engineers. So maybe I need to get some of them on and talk about it. Justin Kramer, should I post all my videos during the Bonhomme Richard fire? Will I get in trouble? It depends, Justin, if you're still in the Navy. If not, you can send them to me, and I'm happy to post them for you without your name associated with them. Let's see. Commander Sweeper. Okay, he's talking about anti-submarine and talking about nuclear weapons. Jump down here to a couple of people who I haven't talked about yet. See, JJ, hello from a land-loving Australian who refuses to get on any boat. Come on, JJ, boats are great. You're crazy. Best time in the world is on a boat. Stan, any thoughts on the training cadets on state-of-the-art NMSVs when generally ship architecture, especially Jones Act vessels, is anything but? Soon heading to MSc from MMA next month. So, Stan, a couple of things. I think let me give you the acronyms, what he's talking about in there, because Stan is acronym happy in that one. National multi-mission security vessels. So the U.S. government is building 5 new training ships for the 5 state maritime academies: New York, Massachusetts, Maine, Texas, and California. And these vessels are going to be used to replace vessels that are in some cases over 50 years old. And he's referring to the Jones Act, which is the coastal trade of the United States, and the fact that we haven't really built any new Jones Act. There's only been one new Jones Act vessel launched last year, and that's up on the Great Lakes. There are 2 others being built, and these are larger vessels, I should say. We're building tugs and barges and coastal river vessels all the time, but I'm talking about larger kind of ocean-going type vessels. And we need to amend the Jones Act. We need to make changes. We really do. I get tagged, and if you look at my Twitter tag right now, it has something about the Jones Act that I will comment on the Jones Act, because I attack those who want to just repeal the Jones Act. They want to just get rid of it and think, well, let's repeal it and everything will be better. And it's like, no, it's like, it won't be better. It'll be worse, because just eliminating the issue doesn't change the problem, or doesn't eliminate the problem, I should say. There has to be reform. The problem is the maritime industry doesn't want to budge. Those who oppose the Jones Act don't want to budge, and those 2 people are not going to come off their hills. There's got to be smart change done here. And the problem is it tends not to be done. Instead, they love to yell at each other. And that's where I get caught in the middle, which I love. I do love starting things. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I can get a good Jones Act fight going any day of the week. Do you think the problem in the Navy today is partially due to an old institution that is resistant to change and also a lack of willingness to spend money? I think my view on the Navy is this. I think it's become top heavy, bureaucratic. We've got more admirals than we have ships. It has become so much cover your butt that you're afraid to take risk. I also think there's no accountability in some ways. There really isn't. I also think that my big issue that I have attached to more than anything else is that post World War II, the Navy and the commercial industry bifurcated. They went 2 different ways. And you have to have a commercial industry to support the military. You have to have the military support the commercial industry. And if you look at a shipyard like Huntington Ingalls in Newport News, they have one customer and one customer only, the Navy. That is not a way to do business. It's just not. There's no competition. There's no nothing. There's nothing there. If you look at China, Japan, Korea, They all have robust navies. They also have robust commercial merchant marines. They also have a robust commercial maritime industry, shipyards, ship repairs. You need that. And the problem is the Navy doesn't want to talk about commercial. The commercial doesn't want to talk about Navy, and never will the two get together. John Conrad talks about this all the time. You go to the biggest commercial conference in the United States, the Connecticut Maritime Association, you won't see the Navy. You go to the Navy's biggest conference, you won't see commercial shippers except for those who have government contracts. It's a huge disconnect that needs to be fixed. Sean, okay, Sal, tough question, and you don't need to answer if you cause liability concerns. But would the crew of a cruise ship and the way it's built to better, way it's built to better in a fire scenario than the crew of Bonhomme Richard? So, fire on a modern cruise ship. First off, a lot of the systems are automated, sprinklers. You have a lot of automation on a modern cruise ship. You also have the ability to lock down sections of the ship in a much better way. You may not never notice it on a modern cruise ship because the hallways are huge, passageways, but there are fire doors. And those ships on a trip of a button on the bridge shuts these fire doors. And so you can isolate, you can shut ventilation. These ships are designed in modules and sections. And because of that, you can isolate fires a lot closer. So I think that the ability to isolate a fire is better. The problem on a cruise ship is if that fire builds out of the inception stage into a larger stage and you cannot isolate it, you're in worse situation. First off, you've got people on board that are going to friggin' panic like you wouldn't believe. I'll give you another thing. There's not enough lifeboats on a cruise ship for everybody. I don't know if you don't know this or not, but we're back to Jack and the Titanic. There's not enough. You cannot get everybody in them. You actually have to get them in life rafts. Cruise ships operate under a provision where they do not need enough lifeboats. I mean, it used to be you needed enough lifeboats on just one side of the vessel. So, because if it tips, you can lower them. Now you don't have that. And now you have to have life rafts. How much of the crew is going to be focused on getting the passengers off versus fighting the fire? That's the other issue you have. The other problem is crew. I mean, the crews are from all over the place. Who's on these fire teams? How well? One of the things that I would argue, and I argued in the Bonhomme Richard video about this, is Navy fire crews are extremely well trained. Extremely well trained. I've been through their fire trainers. Well trained. They just don't have a lot of practical experience. And understand, practical experience of a fire is a whole different thing. The hardest thing I do as a volunteer firefighter and as a professional firefighter when I train firefighters is to get them out of their head of being afraid of going into a structure that's burning. It's not a natural thing to do. It's just something you don't do. And the worst time for a firefighter is riding the truck to the fire, sitting in the back, waiting for the fire. That's called dread. Dread's the worst fear in the world. And I think if we ever had a fire on one of these large cruise ships, if they can't get it knocked out fast, it's going to turn bad. It will turn bad very quickly because they will lose it. They will lose it and it'll get away from them. And the danger here is that the passengers panic. And that's where you'll lose the people, is in the abandoning ship. Look at Costa Concordia. Costa Concordia, understand, Costa Concordia was 32 people killed. You are lucky you didn't have hundreds dead. If the wind had gone in a different direction and that ship had not blown toward Giglio, but blown offshore, that ship would have capsized and sunk and killed hundreds, if not thousands, of people. It would have killed. They were lucky they didn't kill the people in the lifeboats, understand, because they were lowering lifeboats on the side where the ship was listing. And because the ship hit bottom, it stopped rolling over for a period so they can get the boats out. They could have killed, I can't even tell you how many people. And most people don't even give a pause to it today. They just keep trucking along. Keep going here. I hope that helps, Sean. Let's see. Mad Pete, looks like the Ukrainians slapped him on friggin' like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I keep going back to that. Just not sure about it. Let's see. Let's see. Blazing a trail. I don't think I'm blazing a trail. I appreciate that. It's very nice you guys to say. Jim's wishing me a happy anniversary, my 30th. I appreciate that. Purple Runner, any comments on how to make it more enjoyable for the crews that are forced to work on Navy ships when at dockside for repairs and other stuff? Okay, Purple Runner, I didn't even mention in the video what's going on with the George Washington in the shipyard at Newport News. First off, you should not have a crew on board at all during a shipyard period. It's miserable. You're losing power, working all the time. It's miserable work. The Navy is supposed to have berthing barges where they can bring them in. And they used to use old troop ships for this, but now they build purpose-built berthing barges. But again, APLs are not exciting. Nobody wants to spend money on these things. But you shouldn't be living on a ship in a berth. Imagine living in a. First of all, understand living on a ship is like living in your office at a skyscraper. At an office building. You live where you work. And then not only do you live where you work, but now they're doing major construction. And it's the most miserable feeling in the world. And most shipyards are far away from everything. And so the Navy needs to spend money on accommodations. They need accommodation barges. They need, this is not a thing that needs to go to sea, but they need rooms and berthing on board, food, relaxation areas, internet connection. Stupid things that we take for granted sitting here right now, they don't do. And that is a problem. Keep going here. Let's see. Good Life, Greenscapes, Breckenridge. You have to be effing kidding me about the train gauge difference from Europe to Europe. Yep, it's true. It's Ukraine's on the old Soviet gauge. Let's see. Chris saw stories about Russians stealing Ukrainian John Deere tractors, and John Deere was able to remotely disable them. Yeah. Not only are they stealing tractors, they're stealing grain out of the silos and from the fields. And that is a big issue right there. The Russians are in the midst of this grab for a lot of material and grain, which is going to have a big issue. Going back here, a guy who worked for me 2 summers. Let me go back a minute. Justin Kramer, talking about thermal imaging cameras. Yeah, I didn't even talk about thermal imaging in the fire. I apologize. Good Life Greenscapes, a guy who worked for me 2 summers ago, left in the fall of 2020 to unload containers in the port of LA, asked me if there's any work in the mountains now because the containers have basically stopped. Well, I question about the unload containers. Where is he unloading them? Because you don't unload the containers in the port; those are in warehouses. And if you're talking about in the terminals, it depends on which terminal you're in and the ship's companies that are coming in. Different terminals have different businesses, but right now the Marine Exchange just showed a little over just around 40 ships right now waiting to get into LA and Long Beach. Now the port may be slowing down the vessels to catch up. One of the problems is when the terminal fills up with containers, they stop bringing ships in to clear the terminals out. So they can do that. And that's an issue that's been a problem here. The plebiscite planes are better than ships. They just aren't as efficient or cost effective. Wings are still cooler. That we're going to disagree on this. I'm sorry. I'm just going to disagree with you on this one. Going to keep trucking along here. I'm going to try to find some questions from some people who didn't ask me a question yet. Quetzalcoatl, can you, if general average declared, you simply give up your goods? Yep, you can just not claim them. Just not claim them, and then what they'll do is they'll do like a storage wars thing. They'll bid them off. Mad Pete, my partner was doing a master's in international law, and she was talking about general average the week before Ever Forward failed to turn. She said your summary was quite good. Well done. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm always nice to hear when somebody agrees with me. I like that. Vera May, Ever Given. There are satellite photos showing it bouncing from side to side of the Suez. Yeah, well, the AIS track. I did a whole video on that on her AIS track through the Suez, and you saw that really there. Go on here. Injured Duck. What were the motive they said for setting the fire in Bonhomme Richard? So that E1 that they have arrested, he failed out of basically, I think it was Bud School, which is the school there for SEALs. And basically they said that he was just disgruntled. He had broken up with his girlfriend. And that's the issue they're given. Again, the ship had just come out of the shipyard. I'm not sure they weren't scheduled to deploy yet for quite a while yet. They were just going to start working up. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And even the investigators said there wasn't enough evidence to convict him, and yet they're going forward with it. So anyway, let's just keep going. Will Piler, Tracy Alloway stuff just got even more pricey. Yeah, that is true. Poor Tracy. I feel bad for Tracy and her goods. Let's see. Sean Quigley. Silly question, but was the idea of setting a water curtain via the sprinkler system beyond the fire area ever considered by your COC if it was even questionable with equipment? Oh, he's asking Justin that. I got to say, I'd love to talk to Justin about this because that's to me is one of those big issues is to set up, some sort of barriers of protection. And that's why I think the fireboat was so important in there. I think it's such a good one. Let's see. Going along here, I apologize. Let's see. I'm gonna keep talking here and look at some things here. Czar 15, hi. Why are used 40-foot containers up in price so much and when you would expect them to come down? So they are up, and that's because of demand going back. But there was just a story in FreightWaves last week talking about how we may have reached the peak of that right now. And so we may see container costs start coming down. But there was another story the week before that talking about how containers are in short supply in Europe, which are needed to load goods going to America. So again, it's such an interesting system. We're so dependent on the movement of these boxes that when there are disruptions, they don't move. Keep going here. Jerry Odell, salty is the word we use on the Great Lakes for non-fresh blue water ships. There are many more this year that seem to be sailing with grain and coal heading to Europe. Yeah, I did some interesting stories I did on ships going directly into the Great Lakes this year. I think it's an interesting one. Keep going. Let's see. Carol, do you know anything about Terramar? It's in the news lately as an elite country. No, I don't know anything about that. I'm sorry. I'll have to look it up. Nancy Salford, Maritime Administrator. Funny you mention that, Nancy. I'm not the Maritime Administrator, but tomorrow, Monday, the Senate is voting on Ann Phillips to become the next Maritime Administrator. And what I am hearing is that Republicans in the Senate are going to block her confirmation, but there may be some Democrats too that are going to block her selection because of her qualifications and just her lack of answers. I did a video on it too. I did a video on a lot of these things on her ability to answer the questions, particularly from Senator Cruz on LNG terminals in Texas. Keep going. Keep going here. QALA, are you going to cover SS Montgomery? They're going to start part of the removing the stuff that boom starting in June. So Montgomery was a Liberty ship. I believe she was a Liberty ship that was sunk off in the Pacific, I believe, off Alaska coast, loaded with munitions. And there's a whole story about the use of these vessels for after World War II. A lot of ships were used. There was a whole program actually used for filling vessels with old munition, scuttling them, and then there was an event that one of the ships scuttled and exploded. And then they started loading them with these explosives to test detonations underwater. God knows how many fish and wildlife they killed underwater in those detonations. Mad Pete, an Australian mining magnate, just started building a massive hydrogen plant. He's converted trucks, trains, and an ore carrier to hydrogen. Yeah, and matter of fact, there was a hydrogen carrier out of Australia heading to Japan not too long ago. One of the first commercial shipments of hydrogen we saw. Keep going here. Maritime Hawaii, talk about the Matson and their new vessels. Yeah, they got 4 of them. 2 of them built at NASCO and 2 of them from Philly, I believe. Just talked to somebody from NASCO too about whether or not Matson is going to be looking to build any more new vessels because they're kind of flush with cash right now. Something that you don't usually see. Tom, when putting the batteries on ships, they still have to be charged since the U.S. is still 80% carbon generated, which is the logic. Yeah. And that's the problem is having some battery power in those batteries. Injured Duck, can you talk about Poor Richard's Almanac? Just looked up what the name Bonhomme Richard meant. Yeah, Bonhomme Richard was named for the almanac written by Benjamin Franklin when John Paul Jones was in France in 1779. He was looking for a vessel. He had just gotten off the Ranger, and the Benjamin Franklin, who was ambassador to France, was able to negotiate with the Queen of France to obtain an old East Indiaman merchant ship. And so John Paul Jones named it for Ben Franklin for his almanac, but he used the French name, which translates as Bonhomme Richard, which is basically Poor Richard. Keep going here. John talking about containers filled with batteries on short sea routes. I agree. I think that where they would work better. Let's see. Brad Palmer, repeal the Jones Act and end up like the UK. Do you think they could mount a Falklands type campaign? Say, no, Brad, I talked about this with the P&O ferries. I talked about the fact that P&O ferries was absolutely essential for the British and the Falklands, and it's something they could not do today. And so I think that the repeal of Jones Act would do a very similar thing. And let's be clear, when I just posted something not too long ago where somebody sat there and said, well, the Jones Act is the reason for the decline of the U.S. Merchant Marine. U.S. Merchant Marine is number 21. Great Britain's at 22. They don't have the Jones Act. France doesn't have the Jones Act. Italy doesn't have the Jones Act. Netherlands doesn't have the Jones Act. They've all declined. It's not the Jones Act. There are other factors at play. Keep going here. I'm not as good as DRAC. I can't do 3 hours. I'm going to be wrapping up here in a second. I'm going to jump all the way to the bottom here for a second. Claudio, I really hope container price drop. I import packages, food products from Chile to New York, and the last quote I got was $14,000. Last two I paid was $3,800 in May of 2021 and $5,500 in October of 2021. Yeah, it's got to come down, but there's just no telling when it's going to come down. And I think that's the big challenge right now. There are a lot of factors that keep pushing the value up. And again, one of the things I try to do is put into context where shipping plays in that overall cost. And again, Chile to New York, that's a route that's not a very big one, but again, you do have ships traveling on it. You're probably using Hamburg Sud, bringing it up, which is a subsidiary of Maersk, for example. There's a lot of ways to increase and improve this, and needs to be done. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is demand is spiking so much, and this is one of the reasons for the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. Fear that the ocean carriers begin to manipulate the system and keep rates at a really high level. Let's see. I'm going to jump back up here because I'm going up from the bottom now just to see, and I just want to hit a couple of questions. Let's see. Argus Sellers. Sal, do maritime trainees learn how to navigate with compass and sextants in case GPS failed? They do. In the maritime schools, they still do. In 1990, I want to say 96, the Navy Academy stopped. They stopped teaching navigation by use of compass or of sextant largely. And they went almost entirely to electronic navigation. They've brought it back recently, which is good because of the feeling that navigation can be spoofed, and it's a big problem. So it's good to have a redundancy, and I would argue that's always a thing. The very first ship I sailed, this is pre-GPS. The very first ship I sailed on, we had something that was called transit sat nav, and these are satellites that were in polar orbit, and you would get readings from them every couple of hours, and they were great, really pinpoint, and they were good. But the ship I was on lost transit sat nav. Loran, we were in the Caribbean. Loran was terrible down there. And so we became masters of celestial and terrestrial navigation. And I always think that it's really important to keep those skills up, to have a redundancy. Let's see what we got here. Just want to keep going up. Argus, again, comment from you. Really enjoy the stream. Thank you so much. Just seeing if there's any other questions I missed here. I know I missed some, and I apologize. Well, what I want to do is I'm at hour 28 minutes, longer than I wanted to go. I want to take a minute and just thank everybody for tuning in for tonight. I thought it would be great to do a live stream. Hadn't done one in a while. I'd really like to get in the habit of doing one. I don't think I have as much to say as somebody like DRAC, who can do 3 hours every week. He's amazing. What I would like is, if you guys got questions, please post them to me. Let me know. And, I'm going to make sure my email is posted on the YouTube channel. If you go into contact information, it's right there. I posted it here again, mercoglianosal@gmail.com. And, if I get enough questions built up, do another one of these episodes. I love the opportunity to talk. You got me at a grading for an hour and a half, which is very good for me. I needed a break from reading exams and tests. I got to get them all in by Wednesday. So it's a little bit of a hooky for me right now to do this. I'll be working on What the Ship, the next episode coming out probably for Tuesday on top 5 stories coming out. Usually what I do over the week is just see what's happening, what's cultivating. I like to hit Monday and see what's new in the news and then come out. I said I'll be up tomorrow morning early with the bilge pump guys doing that video. That'll probably be out later in the week, and I'll be sure to have that video posted for you so that you'll be able to get the podcast and link to it. I'll be sure to send it out via my YouTube channel. And if you want to get those notifications, just hit subscribe and hit the bell. You'll get notices through YouTube about that. Or follow me on Twitter at Mercogliano and I'll be sure to post it there. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. A little bit long, a little bit jumbly, as always. Still trying to figure out what works best for these. But again, I appreciate everyone paying attention and coming out. Uh, I think you guys are a great group, and I really appreciate all my followers and what they do. So until our next live stream, hopefully we'll sooner rather than later. This is Sal signing off till our next video. Thanks everybody, and again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And if you have not called your mother yet, go do it now. That's my one note to you guys for today. All right, that's it. Have a good one. Bye.